10 days after Andrés Escobar accidentally sent a football into his own net, he was shot outside a nightclub in Medellín. The world compressed those events into one brutal sentence. He was killed for an own goal. But that sentence quietly replaces after with because of. It gives one mistake on a football field the power to pull a trigger. And the gap between those two words is where this story actually begins. In the summer of 1994, Colombia did not arrive as an underdog. FIFA records a 28-game unbeaten run and a 5-0 qualifying victory over Argentina. The team carried serious expectations. Some observers discussed them as possible champions. That hope carried a darker weight. Historical reporting describes an era when drug money entered clubs and violence shaped ordinary decisions. Andrés' club, Atlético Nacional, had won South America's biggest club trophy in 1989, while cartel money influenced the financial world around Colombian football. Their opening match turned expectation into panic. Romania beat Colombia 3-1. The Guardian's reconstruction reports threats reaching the team afterward, including a warning connected to team selection. Players later described a squad frightened and distracted before facing the host nation. That pressure never appeared on the scoreboard. On June 22, Colombia played the United States at the Rose Bowl. The score was still 0-0 when John Harkes drove a low cross into Colombia's penalty area. Andrés stretched out his left leg to intercept it before an American attacker could reach the ball. It was the kind of defensive action he had performed correctly hundreds of times. This time, his touch changed the ball's direction. The goalkeeper had already moved toward the cross. The ball rolled behind him and into Colombia's net. Andrés stood up and walked back toward the center circle. There was still a match to play. The United States scored again. Colombia pulled one back late but lost 2-1. A later win over Switzerland could not prevent elimination. The own goal became the image of the collapse because a defender's work is usually invisible. A correct interception disappears into the next few seconds. A mistake survives forever in slow motion. Andrés was 27. Teammates remembered him as calm, disciplined, and deeply respected, the gentleman of football. He was recently engaged, with a life moving forward even while one replay tried to freeze him in a single moment. After returning to Colombia, friends and family worried about him. Andrés did not hide. He wrote a newspaper column about the defeat. He acknowledged the pain, but urged people not to surrender to anger or continue the country's cycle of violence. The man blamed for a national disappointment was asking the nation to respond with restraint. That choice makes the next part harder to understand. In the early hours of July 2nd, Andrés left a nightclub in Medellín. Witness-based accounts say a group had mocked him about the own goal inside and continued confronting him outside. Andrés tried to explain that it had been an honest mistake. The argument escalated in the parking lot. Humberto Muñoz Castro, a driver connected to powerful traffickers, fired repeatedly. Andrés died soon afterward. Those facts create an irresistible fury. Criminals were linked to underground betting. Men connected to that world confronted the player whose mistake symbolized Colombia's failure. Therefore, the familiar story says, a losing bettor ordered his execution. Contemporary police considered gambling losses as a possible motive. The theory fit the sequence and the men at the scene. Repetition hardens suspicion into public memory. But a persuasive story is not the same as a proved story. Muñoz Castro confessed to the shooting. He was convicted and received a 43-year sentence, yet served only 11 years. Associated Press reporting later described his employer, Santiago Galán, as allegedly tied to the killing. The shooter did not implicate his bosses. The accessible record proves a confrontation, a gunman, and a murder. It supports the fact that the own goal was used to taunt Andrés. It does not establish a queen chain from a specific losing bet to an execution order to the trigger. Another account says armed men with enormous power could not tolerate being challenged. That too depends on later testimony. The honest answer is less neat. The exact motive remains disputed. Andrés' former coach Francisco Maturana later rejected the idea that football itself killed him. He described Andrés as being in the wrong place during a violent period in Colombia's history. That does not make the own goal irrelevant. It supplied the insult. It focused national disappointment onto one recognizable person. It may have helped create the confrontation. But it was a spark, not the whole machine. The evidence points to a larger machine. Football supplied a public humiliation. Criminal status appears to have supplied confidence. In a place where guns routinely ended arguments, this one became a death sentence. The shooter's early release now reads as another sign of impunity. This distinction changes how we remember Andrés. Saying he was killed for an own goal makes his mistake feel like the cause and his death feel like an automatic punishment. It turns the killers into anonymous servants of football's strange logic. The evidence returns the choices to the people who made them. Andrés attempted a normal defensive play. Men chose to follow and confront him. Muñoz Castro chose to shoot him. Other possible participants and motives remained beyond what a court proved. After the killing, mourners filled Medellín streets. Contemporary reports described crowds demanding justice as his simple wooden coffin passed by. They were not mourning a failed defender. They were mourning a young man, a fiancé, a teammate, and a symbol of the decent country many Colombians wanted theirs to become. The camera preserved the ball crossing the line, so history keeps returning to that clean, visible image. The forces around the murder are harder to fit inside one replay: fear, pride, criminal power, disputed motives, and choices made in a dark parking lot. Andrés' own words after the tournament asked people not to let anger continue the violence. His killers answered that appeal with the very world he hoped football could resist. The own goal was an accident. The killing was a choice, and that difference matters beyond this story. When one visible mistake makes someone easy to blame, pause before treating it as the whole cause. Ask what choices turned that mistake into real harm. The thing caught on camera is not always the thing that caused the tragedy.